to connect with the divine, I wrote down, because I've had people that have asked me for this particular prayer, and I'll just let you pass that one. It's just one sheet. It's what I call my prayer of connection.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very simple prayer. It's the one that I do before every single healing. This is the one I do for myself. So if I have a client, I modify it a little bit. If I don't have a client, every single morning, when I wake up, the very first thing, when I come to consciousness, I say this prayer. And then, once I say the prayer, and it's usually probably realistically around 5:30 every morning, because that seems to be my normal waking time. Then I sign my hands with Reiki. Then I do 3 additional prayers with Metatronic healing. I anchor in the light from the Metatron, the first class. Then I anchor in the crystals, and I anchor in the minerals from the second and the third class. And so all total, the prayers probably take me, I'm going to say anywhere from about approximately 15 minutes. Because sometimes I tend to go and say them over and over and over. With that, I feel that I am completely ready to start my day. I love this prayer. It's one, like I said, that will do, for every single healing, and it just brings me complete, just makes me feel just completely connected. I guess is the best word to put it, which it's called my prayer of connection. So if I feel that my energy is lagging, which in a normal, as you go through life, you absolutely have to replenish your energy. The best thing I found for myself is to walk through a garden. This is not what I used to do. I used to always turn to a book. In the past, I have probably realistically read 500 books. And maybe more. But I know my own personal library contains at least 500. And I know I borrowed some along the way too. But I've just found that for whatever reason, I can read, but it doesn't sustain my attention that long. It doesn't seem to interest me. I would rather just get the direct download from Spirit rather than read somebody else's material. And I think that's happening throughout. So, and it's interesting because the even books that are given to me as a gift, or books that I find I bought for myself, I pick them up, I read a couple chapters, and I'm done. I don't go from cover to cover like I used to. So, but walking through a garden to me, is just the most beneficial thing that feeds my soul. And even in the winter, when there are no gardens in bloom, I've chosen Merrifield Nursery as my support. So effectively, whether I go to Gainesville or whether I go to the one in off Lee Highway in Fairfax, it's a very large inner nursery, and it has wonderful seasonal flowers. So even when Christmas is past, it's going to have wonderful flowers inside of it, and that just seems to totally just revive me and everything. I've talked about contemplation and meditation, so I don't have to talk about that. The 4 books that you have listed on the bottom of that sheet for resource, those are probably the 4 books that have been the most influential in my life. Obviously, the first one is A Course in Miracles. I credit it with saving my life, saving my sanity, saving my marriage, which is quite a bit. So, and that's the foundation for inner peace that did it, because the woman who received the material, Helen Suckman, wanted no credit for it whatsoever, even though the voice came in through her. She did not want her name attached to it at all, ever, 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 ever. So, but the foundation for inner peace was the group of people that came together and that put the book out there, and I think it's been around from the late 70s, early 80s. I think it's been out there that long. Sometimes a little bit difficult to read, sometimes a little bit challenging, but I absolutely, if you haven't studied it, I just ask you to get through the first workbook lesson and don't stop with lesson number 1, because that will stop people dead in their tracks sometimes, because the lesson number 1 says, nothing in this room means anything. And lesson number 2 says, everything in this room means the meaning I give it. So some people literally cannot get past lesson number 1. And I've had some people say, yeah, I took the book and I threw it across the room. It was so frustrating. So, but again, you just have to stick with it. And there is a group study. I offer a group study that's public at Sacred Circle in Old Town, Alexandria, and 2 private classes inside my home. The next one on the list for resource was Ask Your Angels. 40 meditations in that book. But the one thing that they do tell you positively is that they guarantee you, they promise you that you will connect to your guides. You will connect with your angels once you finish that book. I did 38 of the 40 meditations. I found the last 2 kind of redundant, so I didn't do them. But that gave me complete confidence, instead of just me writing down what I heard, which is the way that I always wrote Spirit's message before. I dialogued instead. I asked a question, got an answer, asked a question, got an answer. So by dialoguing, I was able to get a lot of information that kind of kept me in a quandary. And then one day, Wanda asked me, who's talking? And I said, I don't know. She said, well, ask. So from that point on, I started asking, and that's where that's where I got the start of the blog, because effectively I could identify every single time that I sat down and started to write. It got to the point where I didn't even have to ask; they would tell me, because they knew I was going to ask. So,
can you give a for instance?
Well, it's just like the channeling exercises that Wanda leads. It will be anybody from Jesus to Mary, to Archangel Michael, to members of the David Kingdom, to beings in spirit that had earthly lives. Abraham Lincoln came in one day. John F. Kennedy came in one day. And literally that day when I was channeling John F. Kennedy, I said, no, this can't be John F. Kennedy. No, no. And so I just kind of just sat there for a few minutes, and I started up again. Same words. Identical words came in. So then I knew, and it was from one of his speeches. So it was absolutely